let's take a moment to look at this picture that you see here, this animated picture. And as you can see, those two colleagues listening carefully and smiling to whatever the lady in the middle has to say. Now, I wonder what she has to say that has them so hooked up and interested. And you may not wonder too, but the truth is, if you're going to excel in creating a brand for yourself that stands out, you must master the art of effective storytelling. Now, we're going to be looking at the Marshall Ganz view on storytelling. And as he quote, you may think that your story doesn't matter, that people aren't interested, that you shouldn't be talking about yourself. But when you do public work, you have a responsibility to offer a public account of who you are, why you do what you do, and where you hope to lead. The thing about it is that if you do not alter your public story, others will, and they may not tell it the way you like it, as many recent examples show. Now, looking across social media, you'll find a lot of people talking about different topics, different things, and different people. Now, imagine those guys had the opportunity to tell their stories by themselves. Imagine you having the opportunity to tell your story yourself. So now, how can you tell that story? How can you keep people engaged in that story? How can you help people to see where you're coming from and help them to be able to resonate with your philosophy towards life and with what you're building and creating? This is where mastering the art of storytelling comes into play. So, what we're going to be looking at and talking about storytelling is the golden circle. And I know that this circle may not look golden at all, but if you want to get people engaged, as you can see the animated character doing, you must master this circle. And this circle focuses on the why, the how, and the what. This is the golden circle, and it tells us that your story begins with the why. Why did you set out to do what you do? Why do you do what you do? Why do you believe in what you believe in? Why are you living? Why do you exist? This golden circle helps you to connect your story from the inside out, from the root upwards. So, quickly, we'll be looking at the why. And the why, from what I've said, you would understand is the core of the story. The why should be the core of any story that you're telling. And this is the purpose or belief behind the story. It answers the question, why are you telling this story? In storytelling, the why reflects the emotional or philosophical driver that underpins the narrative, providing meaning and a connection to the audience and values, all experiences. So, just like I said before, the why helps people to connect best with your story because when they understand why you do what you do, then they can relate with it. Then they can know where you're coming from. It helps clears out that vagueness and it just helps them see you for what it is that you're trying to tell them, for what it is that you want them to see, for what it is that you want to relate with them. And that way they are able to connect with you better. This is why the why should always constitute every part of the story you're telling. The next is the how. That's the process. Now, this describes the method or approach taken to fulfill the why. So now you have your why you're telling the story. So, how are you going about that journey? What is the process? That's basically what your how is. And if you know very well, this is what keeps people engaged. They want to know what you're doing, they want to see what's going on. This is the process. That why is being implemented through. In storytelling, this will cover specific steps, it will cover the journeys or the challenges that the character face that aligned with the core message. So you already have your why, and then you're showing the process to do what? To give explanation, to give meaning, to give literature to the why. I hope this is clear enough. And then you go then to the what. Now, the result. This is the outcome on the tangible part of the story, which describe what happens. It's the actual event, actions, or achievements that are visible to the audience. So now I want to give you a quick assignment. Now I want you to go back to think about the story of yourself. Focus on the why. And that why could be a specific challenge that you went through growing up. And then the next thing you want to focus on is the process, right? And this process shows the event that explanation that came out of that why. Was it the actions you took or did not take, right? Talk about it. And then the last is the what, which is the result. So when you identify the challenges that you faced or did not face, you identify the process, which is what you did or did not do. Talk about it, and then you focus, you then finalize with the result. So create a 3 minute story about yourself, focusing on these three aspects. Take the story from the why into the how and then the what, which is the core, the process, what you did or did not do, and then the result. Now write that 3 minute story just in the comment section below because I would love to see. Now, going back to the Marshall Ganz view on storytelling, a good public story is drawn from the series of choice points that have structured the plot of your life, the challenges you faced, the choices you've made, and the outcomes you've experienced. This is basically to also referring to the assignment I just gave you. Now, you want to write a story from this phenomenon. You want to think about, first of all, the challenges that you faced, then the choices that you've made or did not make that also constitutes or also help tells the story. And then you want to talk about the outcome that you experience. So write a quick story about this because I would love to see. I did a story like this once, very short story, and I got amazing results that will be appearing on the screen. So I want you to do the same. And if time permits after this class, I will share with you my story. I'm going to talk better about the challenge because it is very important that you understand how to tell the story. So, in writing the challenge, one of the things you want to focus on is what was so challenging about it after all. You want to keep someone interested in your story. So really, what was so interesting, what was so challenging about that challenge you went to? That is what you want to focus on. What was so challenging about it? And why was it a challenge to you? Because that same problem, that same issue might not be a challenge to someone else. Now, when you're explaining why it was a challenge to you, the reader or the listener can better relate with your story, or even if it's not something they've experienced, but then you help them to better empathize and connect with your story. So when you're writing the challenges, these are the things you want to focus on. What was so challenging about it? Why was it a challenge to you? Why did you feel it was a challenge? Now, when you coin your stories around these topics, when you coin your stories around these questions, it helps you to better create a story that resonates with your audience. Now, next, we're going to be talking about the choice. Why did you make the choice you did? Where did you get the courage, or where did you not get the courage? Where did you get the hope or not? And how did it feel? Now, why did you make the choice you did, or why did you not make the choice you didn't? Where did you get the courage to make the choices that you did? Or why did you lack the courage to make the choices that you did not? And where did you get the hope to make the choices that you did? Or where did you lose the hope to not make the choices that you did not? And how did it all feel? This is what you constitute your choices, and this would better help your audience to relate and understand your story, and it would keep them hooked. It would keep them interested. They want to know, why did you even make that choice? Why? Why? Or why did you not make that choice? Why didn't you do it? Do that, that. You know, when you're watching a movie and then you're so interested and then you just want the character to do something or not do something. Why? Because it has you so hooked up. So you want to have your audience hooked up as much as possible. And remember that a story does not always have to be a sub story, because there's this idea or there's this belief out there that this story has to be a sub story before it gets engagement to something. There are lots of stories out there that are not sub story. You have a lot of amazing stories out there that has gained good interest. So the story doesn't always have to be a sub story for it to be an engaging or interesting story. So the next thing you want to then focus on is the outcome. How did the outcome feel? Why did it feel that way? What did it teach you? What do you want to teach us? And how do you want us to feel? These are the things you should be answering when you're telling us about your outcome. And this way, just like the animated character over there, you would be able to distract anyone from what they're doing and just being fully engaged in your story. So now we're going to go to the Marshall Ganz style. And the Marshall Ganz style focuses on one, the story of self, two, the story of us, and three, the story of now. So the story of self is personal, related to you, related to your lifestyle, your calling, your experiences, why you were called to, what you've been called to. So it's focused all on your experiences. And the second is the story of us. Now, the story of us could be a story about your brand. If you're working in a company, if you have a company, this should be a story about your brand or your organization or your community. So this is the story of us. Now, this story focuses on what your constituency, community, organization has been called to, right? It's shared purpose, it's shared goals, it's shared vision. The story of us. It could be the story of your country. It could be the story of Africa, a continent. It could be the story of a specific community. The story of us. And final is the story of now. Now, the challenge this community now faces, the choices it must make, and the hope to which we can aspire. Now, the story of now is talking about the story focusing on the current time, the current situation, right? So, the current challenges and the current hope that you're aspiring to achieve. This is the story of now. So now we can go straight into the three-act structure. And the three-act structure talks about the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. This is the three-act structure. So looking at this graph, you can see you have your tension against your time. So the time is reflecting the duration, right, of the story, how long the story plays out for. And the tension is is a show of you building up interest, building up suspense, right? You're increasing the tension to help keep your audiences engaged. And just like I said, it starts with the setup. So your setup is first, as you can see. So this is where, if you're watching a movie, for example, you just see where they bring the intro, they first take you to specific cities, so you can have an idea of where this story or where this story is happening at, or where this film is being shot at. They take you to the different scenes or just do a brief introduction of the different main characters, and you just see how their regular life is playing out, right? So this is where the setup happens. So you want to always make sure that you have that idea of a setup. When you read good stories, you see things like it was a sunny day, right? We're not here for that now, but just having a nice setup helps create this it helps put images in your audience's mind. It helps your audience imagine. You want to make sure you have your setup well organized in your story. And the next is the confrontation. So this is where you start to introduce the challenge, introduce whatever it is that the main character is going to undergo. This is where the crisis happens, right? This is where you see the your main character losing his job or losing a job, or you start to see the villain coming to attack them. Just this is talking about deconfrontation. And note, during this crisis period is usually when you have your most hooked engagement. It's where you have your highest engagement. Why? Because people always want to know what went wrong, right? And that's why it's always good to put a challenge in your story. It just helps, keeps people attention, because they are always interested in what went wrong, what happened. So after your confrontation, then you want to take it down to the resolution. So this is where you talked about what you did and the result. Okay, I explained this already. Three act structure: divide your story into the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. So now we are going to talk about some principles coined from Henry Amunudu. So Henry Amunudu gives us a bit of stories or secrets to storytelling, and you can apply this even to the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. You can apply it to any story you're writing. So you want to know that a good story involves a lot of things, six things to be precise. And the first is a good beginning. In designing your setup, you want to make sure that you have your beginning settled and well, because that is what is going to draw in their attention to even want to see what happened. Now, if you just start a story very boring, nobody will cares about a boring life. Nobody is interested in wanting to know, okay, what happened next. So you want to make sure your story starts very well. The beginning is well tailored. So people can do what? Be interested in wanting to know what happened or what went wrong. And the next is a centered story. A centered story means you taking a subject. Now you want to focus your story about a subject. And when I say subject, doesn't necessarily mean we're not talking of school subjects. We're talking of a character. Now this is why your story or movies usually have a main character, because you want to center the story around something, around a person, right? So your story should have a main character, and then the story then revolves around this main character. And the third is give value. Now, this is very essential, especially as a professional. Now, you're not just telling, this art of storytelling is not just for you to tell a good story alone, it's for you to know how to tell your brand story, right? For you to know how to position your brand, how to make people relate with your brand. So, in doing that, it is essential that you give in value. Learn to give value through your story. So, before you even write your story, you can ask yourself, what value do you want to share through this story? So when you've decided that value, you can then write your story, dishing out that value little by little. And the fourth is a clear message. It's very important that your story, your message is as clear as possible. Now, there are cases where you have plot twists, which can be really interesting, but you want to make sure that that plot twist is properly designed, is properly orchestrated to not cause a meshed up story that is no longer clear, and then you have some things or some characters in the story that are their roles, or it's a bit confused or something. Now, do not misquote me here, please. Plot twist is good, but when you're doing your plot twist, you want to make sure that you do it in a way that in the end everything is connected. And one of the best story you can look at in looking in thinking of a plot twist is AOT, Attack on Titan. It's an animated video, but the writer did an excellent job in his plot twist, being able to do things in the beginning that the audience we didn't take note of. Well, when it got to the end, we started seeing that all of those things that happened from the beginning, everything was connected. There was nothing left unanswered, right? So this is in even in doing a plot twist, you can still make your message clear. You can make all of your message connected and make sure that every end is locked. And fifth is engagement. So it's necessary that whatever you're doing stirs engagement. And the sixth is be consistent. In your story, you want to be consistent. Do not open topics that you're not going to close, right? So when you have your character, you can't have a main character and then tomorrow it's another main character or it's another main character. So when you have your main character, you want to make sure your story is centered around that main character. Now, I know another confusing movie that I can mention here would be Game of Thrones. Now, Game of Thrones has several main characters, and in Game of Thrones, the main character goes just beyond a person now to a family, right? We have different families that were serving as the center of the story. And even though it was different families, the story still revolved around those families. So this is where you want to make sure to maintain consistency. So if you want to do something like Game of Thrones, you want to make sure that your story is still centered around that specific family. It's still centered around whatever situation or circumstance you want to create. So that's what it means to be consistent in your storytelling. So now we're just going to do another case study. First of all, I've given you one assignment. So this is another one. So you're going to tell us about your educational journey in no more than 200 words. How have you experienced education? How has your education shaped you? What are your reflections on your educations and the applications of your learnings to date that you want to share? Education is about learning, and learning happens through repetition and reflection. I'm curious to hear some of the insights and reflections about your education, how you learn best, what you may want to explore further, how you're applying what you've learned, and so on. That's all we're after. And there's no right or wrong answer here. There's no right or wrong answer to your storytelling. Do best to portray your story as much as possible, following the guidelines that I've given. So now we're going to talk about your story trajectory. So in writing your story, you can use this trajectory: story reflection, story contention, story conversation, and storytelling. So story reflection, think about the story you want to tell. We talked about talking about your educational story. So what part of your education do you want to bring up? What aspect of your education do you want to bring up? Do you want to bring talk about your school setting, how schooling was like as a nursery student versus how it was like as a primary to an high school and then to a college or university student? Or do you want to focus on some of your key lecturers, your key teachers? Or do you want to focus on some of the subjects and topics that interested you as a student? So reflect on the story and then pick the part that you want to talk about. Then turn it to a conversation through your storytelling. So the goal is to share bit by bit until you feel comfortable. Always learn to talk about the aspects of the story you're comfortable with. Revolve your story around the aspect you're comfortable with. You don't have to force yourself to share something if you're not comfortable sharing it. So thank you for listening. And if you have any question, please do well to leave it in the comment section below. Now we have come to the end of storytelling, and I cannot wait for you to write your own story. Write your story now. Remember, if you do not tell your story yourself, someone else will tell it for you, and you may not like how they tell it. Take that pen and write your story today.